What's going on, everybody? I am here with Miss Alyssa Cantu, one of my favorite people in the world. Always love talking to, always smiling. How are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. We've already had a lot of fun so far. I'm not sure what we're going to talk about, but I'm really excited to talk to you. You've been training martial arts for a while. You've transitioned into the fitness world. You are a coach. You have your own business, and you're coaching other martial arts. So we kind of have a lot in common as business owners, as martial artists. And I just want you to share your experience a little bit and kind of see where it goes. But tell me, like, how did you get started in jiu-jitsu and then moving into the cage yourself and now cornering some pretty big people in the cage as well? Tell me about it.
Definitely. So I actually went to school at Sam Houston State in Huntsville. At the time, I was still doing Taekwondo, and Taekwondo is not very cool in college. I learned.
Yeah, but it's awesome when you're 9.
But I was like, I guess nobody breaks boards anymore. Like,
what does the world come to?
I know. And so I actually had a friend of mine who did mixed martial arts, and he was from up north. And so I was like, well, I guess that's the next thing I should transition to. And I got lucky that Colin Cantrell had an MMA program there. The team was Death Row MMA.
Oh, I remember.
And there were 5 of us, I think, maybe.
It's a hell of a name for a family school.
I mean, well,
Right.
Actually, not to go off the stories, but when I went to Sam Houston, I didn't realize how close the prisons were.
Right.
The Walls unit where they execute people is literally almost on campus. And
Really?
So the first time I heard like the changing of the guard, like the bells, I was like, we have lunch bells in college? Like, I was very confused. And so I was like, no, that's the Walls unit. And I was like, where? I thought that was the library. And it was,
oh, man.
So it was very interesting to go to school there.
Yeah, the lights didn't dim like when they were putting
the
in
Green Mile. No, but
that's not funny at all. It's
not.
super dark.
I know. I should. Sorry. So anywho, that's kind of how I got started into mixed martial arts. Was I met Colin Cantrell and just started training with his team. From there, I had one fight, and it was my like tryout fight to get into Legacy. And then immediately after that, I shipped off to the Army.
Nice.
Came back, lost some weight, and we moved to Houston. So I was not going to Huntsville anymore. So he introduced me to Bob Perez.
Right.
And I was at 4 Ounce for a little while. Still training there, and actually my wife worked for Professor Miguel.
Okay.
It was her internship for her senior year of college.
Yeah.
And she, I was going to 4 Ounce, and she was at Team Tooke Cyprus, and she was like, you should come here and train with me, or at least learn some jiu-jitsu or something. We have Muay Thai as well.
Yeah.
And so I ended up going there and realized I know no jiu-jitsu, and I had a fight lined up. So the rule was I had to train in the gi for 6 months before I could fight.
No.
And I was like, what?
That's
like,
ridiculous.
We don't wear these pajamas. Like, I'm an MMA fighter already. Yeah. Like, what are you talking about? Like, but I was a student, and I understood. And so I actually fell in love with jiu-jitsu. That's kind of where I started.
Well, I think that says a lot, too, about being open-minded, which is a challenge for people, I guess just different personality types when they first start, is we tend to formulate an opinion on how to do the thing that we don't yet know how to do. It's like, well, we see a couple of people, and then we get an idea of like, well, okay, I know how to train. I need to train this and this, and I'm going to knock everyone out. And I had my bias when I began, too, but it was in reverse because I was first exposed to jiu-jitsu. So it was all like Hoist Gracie and, wear the gi, and he was winning those early UFCs. And, nowadays if you put a gi on and go in without knowing much striking and just kind of throw that like Gracie kick and try to come in, you're going to get knocked out in no time. Right. And when I had one fight, and my one and only fight was, the majority of it was focused on making sure that I'm not going to get knocked out in my fight, because obviously my guy knew I was going to try to take him down, so I had to work on the striking part. But so what was it like to kind of see the other world? Because I always tell people, like, the longer I train, the less I feel like I know of all there is to know.
No, exactly. I remember being at 4 Ounce, and we were I think I sparred like maybe one of the first couple days, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I think someone got in my side control and I had no idea how to get up. So I was like, okay, there's a significant weakness here. So when I first started training in the gi, it was awkward. I was claustrophobic. I hated it, but like I understood why I was there. And so I think from there, I wasn't just somebody who I knew I could knock out a girl. Like, you know, I knew that I could escape from my back, or I could, you know, take her down if I needed to. So it really opened my eyes to how much is involved in mixed martial arts. Like, you know, you have your favorite art or the one that you're more skilled in, but there's so many dynamic and aspects to the sport that like, it really opened my mind to like how much I didn't know at all.
Yeah, I think every fighter is going to have sort of their go-to, the part that they love the most. Like it's their first love, whether it be the striking, the grappling, or if they come from a wrestling background. But the high-level athletes, they have to go out and acquire skills in all the different dimensions, even if they're going to try to win with their plan A. But that doesn't happen every single fight. It rarely happens in a championship fight where the other person knows everything about your plan A and your plan B. So you have to really know what to expect, you know, coming from that. Well, you compete a lot in jiu-jitsu, like gi competitions as well. What is, besides getting punched and kicked, like what is the difference in like how you approach the training for that? And I'll say specifically the conditioning, since that's become a big part of your expertise in the business that you're in.
As far as like, what's the difference between the MMA and just jiu-jitsu training?
Yeah, the conditioning, because I mean there's the gripping, and then there's more singularly focused on the style.
Definitely. I think with mixed martial arts, as far as like the cage fighting itself, there's so many different like energy systems that get used. You know, I have to be able to be powerful, so my fast twitch muscles have to be able to fire fast, but I also have to last the entire fight. So I also have to have really long endurance. I also have to be strong, but I have to be fast, so I can't put on a lot of muscle, cause, you know. So as far as training that, I really tried to develop a system where it was just very fight specific. Because I used to be a CrossFitter, I used to be an Olympic weightlifter, then I went to powerlifting, and so I feel like kind of playing with those training programs and competing in those things, I kind of just picked and chose like what I could do, like the best of all of them. So a lot of my training, you know, if it's a 5-minute round, we're going to train for 6 or 7 minutes of as hard as we can, and then kind of taper off from there. So some examples of a workout is I might have somebody push a really heavy sled and then have to run back and then maybe farmer carry and then do like repetitive box jumps. So I'm using, you know, my strength, I'm being explosive, but I also have to be very winded to complete the whole 6-minute round. So it's very specific to that, being able to strike and get up and have endurance. But as far as jiu-jitsu goes, it's a little bit different in the sense I'm either going to be laying down or I'm in a really close quarter with someone. So it's a lot of it is just a lot more flexibility and mobility, a lot of grip strength and a lot of core strength. Like the minute your core breaks, like it just kind of falls apart from there. Yeah. So it's just a little bit different, a little more cardio intensive for jiu-jitsu as well.
Right. I had Dr. Lou on, and we were talking about like common injuries just in different sports, and every sport has the things that you're more likely to the areas where you're more likely to be injured. And we tend to think of jiu-jitsu as being very good for you, and it is. I mean, it's great for your fitness, for your cardio. It's very well-rounded in terms of using your whole body, but you're not evenly stretching and bending in every direction. We tend to be balled up, so I feel like that's where some shoulder injuries happen. Right. Legs are always doing like cut-through passes and stuff. And do you do anything specific to strengthen those sort of more vulnerable areas of the sport?
Definitely. Lots of yoga.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of hot yoga. Yes, I love hot yoga. I also really got into MoveNat. I don't know if you've heard of
What is it called?
MoveNat.
MoveNat? Like a fly net?
MOVNAT.
Oh, NAT.
Probably like Move Naturally is probably what they try to cut short.
That makes a lot more sense.
Actually got into MoveNat when I had a knee injury in jiu-jitsu. I tore my medial and lateral meniscus, and so on the rehab, side, I couldn't really do much weightlifting or much cutting. And it was really just a lot of animal type crawls, I actually had just a 2x4 at the gym, and I would just walk on it barefoot to kind of get, retrain my feet to be barefoot and different stability muscles. Really used a lot of parallettes and pull-up bars, so a lot more gymnastics type-based movements.
Right.
Really developing my core, my shoulder mobility, my hip mobility, my ankle mobility. All those things are tight when you're, striking and when you're lifting weights, but in jiu-jitsu, like, you don't know what position you're going to be folded in or trying to escape from. So just really training in awkward positions and kind of sometimes I would press with like one weight heavier than the other, or do Turkish get-ups with one weight heavier than the other, just because it's a very imbalanced sport, so you should kind of train that way as well.
Yeah, to be prepared for the unexpected. I'm very happy that more and more people are talking about yoga integrated into their training, because I think for years it was an activity designed to help older or slower people, or people that are just trying to do something because they haven't been very active. And when you're younger, an injury or an imbalance doesn't affect you nearly as much, but that adds up over the years. And then when you start to get a little bit older, these injuries tighten, and trying to teach your body to stretch in a way that it can only do when you were a kid is more challenging. I think that's why people quit doing it. There's a patience issue too. But I think that's why it's beneficial to fighters, is because how long does it take to become an expert in martial arts? You're not going to do it in nearly the time it takes to get into shape. It's going to take years. So, so you've done like a ton of things, I'll say. You've done martial arts. I don't have a good word for that, but like powerlifting, gi, no gi, MMA, yoga, and now you have your own facility, Grindhouse Fitness. What prompted you to take that route?
Well, I am a part of Team Tooke, so it's kind of an unknown thing that once you've been here for so long, you have to become an entrepreneur. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes, sort of true.
No, from the business side, being mentored under you and Professor Miguel, it was kind of just like, well, that's the next thing that I'm going to do with my life. You guys really took me under your wing as far as teaching me how to do sales and teaching me, how to run a school. And I actually had the privilege of helping Professor Miguel run his school for so long, that it just kind of felt like, the next step, and an opportunity arose for Dusty, who's my business partner, and I to just kind of take it and make it our own. But I was not expecting for it to become what it has become, and I'm like so grateful for all the people that I've met. We started as just kind of a fitness facility, just kind of general population group fitness, more HIIT style. We did CrossFit, and then slowly we kind of branched to Olympic weightlifting and powerlifting and strongman, and then adding the mixed martial arts was the next step. And I've just been doing that since. I think this is the first time both of my passions have merged, and I'm able to kind of be at one place and have the best of everything that I love.
Right. What's been the hardest thing so far? Like, for example, I was doing a career day at a school the other day, and I was telling the kids, like, my least favorite expression is find what you love and you'll never work another day in your life, which I completely disagree with. It's like, find what you love so you can work twice as much as you would a job that you don't love, because you're going to be working like crazy. And growing this, like, I was starting my dad's garage, there were several years of just kind of survival, and then some peaks where I'm like, oh, I know what I'm doing, and then drop-offs where it's like, maybe I don't, and then being humbled by it, much in the way I would compare to martial arts, kind of getting to a certain belt level. Sometimes, blue, purple, brown, you start to think like, oh, I know quite a bit, and if you keep doing it, you're exposed to this expansive world where it shows you like how much more there is. But you're killing it now, and it looks like you've done really well, but I always like to ask, like, when I talk to other business owners, because I know the dirty side of like making it work, what have been some of the biggest challenges?
I would say not getting, probably the ego, like just trying to keep that in check to like not get overwhelmed with how much work I have, but not also get to the point where I'm like, aha, look at all this stuff I have, because owning a business is the hardest thing in the world. And I think being in the fitness industry, being a female in the fitness industry and a female in the MMA industry, I feel like sometimes I have to work twice as hard because I don't have big giant muscles, and I'm also just pretty quiet unless you get me in this kind of position, so I think that's been kind of one of my struggles, is sometimes feeling like I don't quite fit in, or I feel like I haven't quite made it yet, or making sure that I'm taken seriously. I think has been probably my biggest thing, is like, who's this 5'3" female training heavyweight Derek Lewis? Like, there was a lot I think I had to prove to myself,
right? But
there was also that part of me that was like, you know what to do, like, it's not for anybody except for you and Derek, like, this is your job, this is what you do, like, this other stuff doesn't matter. So just kind of quieting that voice in my head. I think also dealing with people who are like, you own a gym, you must work out every day, like cleaning toilets sometimes, and I'm like, no,
they'll say like, you're so lucky, you just wake up and work out and get paid, and that's all you do.
I was like, yeah, it's exactly what I do all day.
I'll get that too. They're like, man, you just teach class and go home. I'm like, yeah, it's all I do.
It's totally the best.
There's nothing else to this. Well, you bring up a really good point that being a woman entrepreneur in the fitness world, which for many years was dominated by the presence of athletic men. I mean, call it what you want. That's how it's been historically, and now is becoming a lifestyle that a lot of people are embracing. But you still have a culture of athletic men who come from a background of football or intense sports, where it's very much like a locker room full of dudes who are just chanting. And like you said, you have the challenge of maybe somebody sees your ad and they come in and it's a big dude, and then they might have a bias or a preconceived notion, like, you're my trainer, like, you need to be this tall and bench this much. So do you just like put them through hell until they're crying to prove your point? Like, how do you deal with their ego?
I can't confirm or deny that I do that. No, I'm just kidding. I have done that. Usually, for the most part, like, once we get to talking, they're like, oh, okay. Or honestly, having an MMA fight and training MMA helps a lot, because they're like, oh, wait, you get punched in the face?
Yeah.
Like, then it, the tone changes. But I have had some of those. And usually with big, strong guys, you just make them, like, do some mobility stuff, and then that ego comes down. I'm like, okay, well, cool, like, touch your toes.
Right.
Like, something super simple. And they're like, ugh.
There's no weight involved.
Yeah, I can't do this, like, simple movement you're asking me to do. So then kind of the conversation can be held. But it has happened, multiple times. But for the most part, at Grindhouse, we have just a really tight-knit community. And so...
Well, I think your attitude is the reason why you're so successful, because if you were to take that... Well, I think any business owner, if you start taking anything personally, you're done.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're going to deal with opinions of you and what you're doing that are not favorable, or they're just, people are going to have judgments, and you have to not just accept that, but sort of, I think, smile in the face of it, like, oh, this is good. This means I'm reaching enough people to invite some people that might not like me, for whatever reason.
That was probably one of the hardest things. I remember our first year of opening, I don't know how many times I cried over the phone with Dusty, like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, someone canceled and it must be me. Like, it's like, no, it had nothing to do with me. It was like their schedule or their finances, like, so it took me a while, but now I kind of just accept it and roll with it. And I'm like, well, at least I'm on someone's mind. So that's cool.
Oh, the tears of business owners.
Oh,
and you don't get to go to your boss. No, you're the boss.
You are the boss.
You get to cry to yourself.
You got to show back up.
Oh, it's so familiar. But it's worth it.
It is.
And I don't think it's for everybody. Like, I made the joke, like, oh, I've been in Team Tooke, you have to be a business owner. I love seeing people that have been involved with do their own thing, but I also think it takes a person who sort of has that in them, or has a desire stronger than the challenge that comes with it. I had moments where I was like, I'm not having that much fun. I'm not really enjoying it. There were temporary moments followed by waves of, like, I can't believe I'm doing what I love for a living.
Right.
But I've also known so many people over the years that throw in the towel because they just can't get over the hump, or they need the consistency of a regular employment. They need to know the exact amount of dollar that's coming to them, on a monthly basis, and what's expected of them on a set number of hours a week. And in our situation, not just the business owner, but we're still involved in the thing we do, which is coaching. Right. So that means traveling. And like for you now, you're involved in coaching one of the biggest athletes in the biggest event of our sport, which is the UFC with Derek Lewis. And so I remember when I first started doing that, like with Eve Edwards and Andrew Craig, it was the coolest thing in the world. I never imagined doing it. And it is, but it's also like, oh, I've got to leave I remember his very first fight was in Australia, and he called me. And he's like, I got the call. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, UFC. I'm a replacement in the Australia show. This is 2012. So we're leaving on this date for 12 days. I'm like, all right, I guess that's what we're doing. So that's another side of it, is like not just making the numbers line up for the business, but like how do you keep the like the passion part of it alive while having to leave it sometimes?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. That was I remember being on the flight to Madison Square Garden, and I was answering emails and setting up appointments and texting my coaches like, hey, you got a new person coming in. They're like, aren't you in New York? I'm like, well, yeah, but we can't close down for a week.
Yeah. They think you're tweeting about like, oh, I'm in the corner here with this guy. It's like, no, I'm answering prospective emails.
Yeah, like I gotta work still. I have a business partner who understands how much this means to me to be part of the UFC and part of Derek's camp. So, he's really kind of stepped up when I'm like, we at least have a fight day lined up. We know it's going to be a week of solid traveling and time off. So I just kind of make sure everything's put in play, and, he kind of takes over from there.
Yeah.
But I think we've just both kind of really embraced what it is to own a business and then also be, like involved in that business. It's not just a t-shirt company that I run and that's my, cool thing. Like I work out every day. I do strength and conditioning, and then I also change into my MMA gear or my gi and go train with them as well, so I'm an active part of my gym as well as the owner and the coach. So I think that's kind of how I keep it as passionate as I can. Now there is some times where I'm like, I just need a break.
Yeah.
And I think taking those healthy doses of just, I'm not going to train today, and that's okay.
Right. I think it almost takes a business approach to your emotional well-being and sanity when doing it. It's not just like, oh, I'm stressed out, what am I going to do? It's like, well, there are answers out there. What have other people done? And you talked about yoga as a physical means to overcome injury and longevity, but that's sort of a mental break too.
Oh, for sure. I actually got into yoga for meditation purposes. And then I was like, man, this was a really hard workout. And then I was like, oh, this is probably going to really benefit my jiu-jitsu. So then I just became addicted and have done it ever since. But
I feel like people would be surprised if they knew how many entrepreneurs are working on mindfulness in their off time, because you see them like just kind of going 24/7 like machines. And I'm not like those entrepreneurs that are just killing it at certain levels, but obviously I'm pretty busy. And when you teach, just like when I teach, you have to put on a smile and exude a certain amount of energy. You can't come in and be like, oh God, I'm just stressed out. All right, let's get ready. Like you just killed, the energy. So you keep that energy. Like, oh, how do you do it? It's like, well, it's a lot of like breathing, sitting quietly, and finding the best ways to do that.
No, absolutely. I think I had one incident where I had an employee who, had to quit, and then we kind of got into it, and then like 10 minutes later I knew I had to go coach, and it was just like, I need to go cry for 5 seconds. I'm gonna be okay.
Power crying. Yeah,
power
that could be a new thing.
But I think also I'm a fan of making lists, and that has helped as well. Just kind of I'm very much needed all the time by either a member or a staff member or a future member or, a fighter or somebody. So I used to just think that I had to do all of it all at once, and so I think trying to make a list of like, okay, this one I can do today. This one doesn't make me happy. I'll push that away. Like today I really can't deal with that, and just being true to myself and being mindful of like how I feel and how I know I'm going to react and how I should react. And that's really helped. And honestly, like from yoga, like I learned that from yoga, how to breathe from yoga. It's all just so important.
Right. So let's talk about your helping Derek Lewis prepare for his camps. And this is recent. You haven't been with him since the beginning of his training or even his UFC career. But recently you've been in his corner for several fights, his fitness coach, and he seems to be for someone who's not notoriously known as being the most, guy that shows up at the gym to work out every day. He seems to be in better shape than I've ever seen him before. What's been the routine like with him?
Yeah, definitely. So when he first came in, he had just had his knee surgery. This was last summer. I think we started working together in August of last year. And so he was going to rehab still for his knee. And it was just, I'm really close with Crew Bob, and he kind of suggested like, hey, I'm going to bring Derek over. Like, let's see if you'd want to work with him. I had trained him a couple of times in the past before the DC fight. But it was just kind of one-offs here and there. And so once Derek came in, I was able to meet with his PT, see what his knee was like, and just kind of cross my fingers and hope that he would be okay to some like weird training that I have him do, because it's not, just machines or just powerlifting. It's a very blend of a lot of different things. And we just kind of started to see his strength improve, and at the same time he had, because
he wasn't strong enough before.
Right? Yeah, Derek wasn't strong. I was very intimidated when he came, because I was like, "What? Do I even have enough weights in here for him to like push? Like, well, what is your max?
Grab that motor off that vehicle."
Yeah, we're just gonna push his truck. But at the time, he had also hired a nutritionist. So nutrition was the person that he came in, so he was cooking for Derek, so he was steadily losing weight at the same time he was getting stronger with his leg, and then we just slowly started seeing the pounds come off. So he didn't cut for the fight in New York. He was walking around like 265, 270.
Wow.
And so that was the first time that had happened. He was a bigger guy. I think we started the camp at 290.
Oh.
And he was kind of known to gas out a little bit, like that's just a big guy expending so much power and energy. Like I would gas out too, so I really wanted to build that endurance. Like I wanted him to be able to show people like, hey, I'm not just a one knockout punch. Like I know how to do this stuff. Like, there's so much more I have left to show you guys. So that was kind of my approach, was really just strengthening his legs, making sure his back was healthy, making sure his core was healthy and his shoulders, and then just building that power and endurance together.
Yeah. I was just thinking, like what we said a moment ago about when you have kind of like the meatheads that come in and maybe they're like, oh, well, you're a smaller woman and you have to take them through the program to prove, that you know what you're doing. I think now just show them the picture of like walking out. I was like, I trained this guy.
Yeah.
He's bigger than you and all your friends together.
So it's fine.
Yeah.
And I've only dropped one piece of equipment on Derek. So like,
what was it?
It was a 50-pound slam ball. He was throwing it up at me and it just got sweaty. And I was like, it was slow motion, like, oh no.
You hit him in the face?
No,
because it wouldn't hurt him.
I hit him probably below the belt or at the waist. Like I was like,
in the sweat, in the hot area.
In the hot area.
The hot balls region.
I was like, okay, I'll tag someone else in for this 50-pound ball. So it is really funny because he is so strong, and we do this drill where we do rotational throws with a big like 30-pound wall ball, and I think the first time we did it, Crew Bob tried to catch it, and you just hear, we're like, don't catch that anymore. And then I tried to catch it, and I was like, okay, so
how do you gauge that? Because that's so different than the average human being who's going to be moving around and throwing things around. I remember I want to ask Bob this too, like how he holds pads for that guy when he throws kicks, because I feel like my buddy Robbie Rabati in Austin. He's a big guy. And he had me hold pads for him one time just for a couple of kicks. And I was like, I don't want to do any more because it hurt my forearms. And maybe I'm being a baby, but I had real concern for the bones in my forearms.
Yes.
But
well, not only that, but Derek is so tall that Bob has to hold them up and out.
Which is, I got rotator cuff issues and everything.
Like lots of shoulders. So funny you say that. I actually started to show Bob some shoulder kind of mobility, like with the bands. I'm like, you should probably do this before you hold.
You should warm up before you hold
for this
pads.
guy. Yes.
Warm up for his warm up.
Man, I think they've just been doing it so long. Like he knows how much resistance he needs to put in.
Yeah.
You know,
well, you find that connection with somebody where I think in the beginning you're sorting it out, but then you kind of sync up with, this is your rhythm, this is your power, and this is how I need to engage my whole body to be ready for what you're bringing.
Right.
So, well, this has been awesome talking with you,
Yeah.
and congratulations on Grindhouse Fitness.
Thank
How
you.
can people find you?
You can find me on the interwebs, grindhousehouston.com, or on Instagram, Grindhouse Fitness.
All right. Go check her out. Trainer of Hot Balls, Derek Lewis. And thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I
All right.
appreciate it.
See you guys. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that, please be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to share this video with somebody else. Thank you.